Check it out. It's the Laugh to Learn podcast. What is going on, everyone? Welcome to the Laugh to Learn podcast, your weekly source for a fun spin on all the news you need to know about from around the world. My name is Jacob Paveo, and of course I come to you every single Wednesday afternoon, 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, fresh for you to download, listen to it anywhere around the world, at any time of day, on basically any platform, which is very nice. If it's your first time here, welcome to the show. If you're a returning guest, thank you for coming back. It's always appreciated. If you enjoy it and you haven't done so already, you can hit that subscribe button and the podcast will automatically download to whatever feed you're on. It'll just show up every Wednesday, 1 p.m., as I said. Yeah, you don't even have to worry about it. Some of them even give you a notification like, hey, the podcast is live now, and you can check it out. So feel free to do that. If you want to get in touch with me, of course, I have all of my social media links down below, or you can use the contact page over at www.laughtolearnpodcast.com. This week, much like it's been like the last while, where I guess we had a 3 or 4 week period where it was, nice. There wasn't something we had to talk about. Well, this week, there is something we have to talk about. And it's kind of crazy because this happens on a week where Russia directly attacked a busy shopping center. I think that like something like roughly 40 people are dead and like 80 people are injured. There was an estimated 1,000 people in this shopping center when the blast happened. Like just literally like a shopping market in the middle of the day, full of people. So, while that's happening in Ukraine, this just is so crazy that we have to talk about it. And a lot of people have been asking about it and unsure, especially non-American listeners. Most of my friends, right, living in Canada, most of my friends really don't understand or follow American politics beyond like who's the president and whatever, right? But then they see something like this. Of course, I'm burying the lead here, but Roe v. Wade, the abortion protection that was verified by the Supreme Court several decades ago, has been overturned. Now, there's a lot of confusion about this. A lot of people really don't understand it, but they feel very passionately about it, which is understandable, right? And I mean, if you're listening, it doesn't matter what side of the fence you're on. Typically, people are either pro-life, absolutely, or pro-choice, absolutely, and they don't feel like there's common ground here. And I kind of completely get that, right? It doesn't really make sense on this argument because there is no gray area. You either view this one way or the other, right? And basically, what I want to address today is what happened and what can be done about it, because I think that's important as well, and then get into the actual debate side of things and what I think people need to understand to approach this debate. And now I am going to start by being upfront. I've talked about my opinions on abortion before, but I'm going to be upfront in this episode in case you haven't heard those, because I am pro-life and I'm pro-life. Oh my God. It's because I'm reading the screen. I am not pro-life. I am pro-choice. Wow. And I used to actually debate pro-life people in high school. I went to a Catholic high school, and I have, on many occasions, directly debated with the teachers mostly, because the students just avoided the conversation with me, but with many of the teachers who were in the pro-life club, because there was a pro-life club at our school. And like, this is going back to when I was like 14. So I'll just start there, I guess, because my opinion on all of this is, it's quite evident to me that a baby is human life, right? However, I don't think human life is inherently valued above another human's life, that being, in this case, the life of the mother, because I use the viability argument, but I take it further, where obviously a baby, a fetus, is not viable outside of the woman's body. That's quite clear to everyone. However, the counter-argument to that is that a newborn is also not viable. You can't leave a newborn alone in the house without it dying. But I think that's a false argument. It's really just a fallacy, because there is no good defense to this. Because you are saying that the mother carrying that child, her life is less valuable, and her bodily autonomy is less valuable than the potential life she's carrying inside of her. And I can't make that jump, because I can take care of an infant. A 1-day-old baby can be dropped off at my front door, and with medical advancements today and formula and everything, like, anyone can take care of an infant, right? We can do that. You cannot take care of a fetus, right? You cannot do anything about it. So that's where I fall on this argument, but we'll get into, if we have time later, we will get into that discussion. But I want to talk about what happened from a political and legal perspective, because this is where a lot of people are confused, because the conversation on the left is that this was in our Constitution, that we have the right to abortion, this being Americans have the right to abortion, and it's now been taken away. But that's actually not true. So what happened was Roe v. Wade, which was the benchmark case, the case that set precedent moving forward on abortion. This is, as I said, several decades ago. It was determined in this case that American citizens could not be prosecuted for having an abortion. It was not illegal to have an abortion. However, precedent can be overturned for many different reasons, right? And this has been challenged at the Supreme Court many times, but now it's been challenged by 2 different states recently, and obviously it's been overturned. So the thing is, like, a lot of people are saying that, this precedent was constitutionally binding. That is not true. This is not in their Constitution. It is not a law that you are allowed to have an abortion. That was never done. It was simply presumed that if a case was brought to the Supreme Court, they would simply rule that this had previously been decided upon. And what happened was Donald Trump got to elect 3 people to the Supreme Court. So now there is, and we've discussed this on the show, there is a significant conservative majority of judges on the Supreme Court who are pro-life. And they, there's many arguments to be had about whether or not this decision was religious in some way, and which would technically be illegal, but then it would be. This is part of the problem with the way the U.S. Judicial system works, and their 3 branches of government. Essentially, the judicial system, made up of these 7 Supreme Court judges, or 7 or 9. I can't even remember anymore. I've been doing too much this morning on this. They are allowed to set laws in a way. So Roe v. Wade was effectively a law without ever being passed into law, because it was passed off to the Supreme Court. Now, this is because back in the 80s, 70s, 60s, really not until the mid aughts, the like 2004, 2005, is where public opinion started to change in larger numbers about legal abortion becoming favorable. So people in favor of legal abortion didn't happen until the 2000s. So when Roe v. Wade was settled, the case was settled. Essentially, the American population was not really in favor. They weren't really in favor of legal abortion at that time. Even today, it's very close. It's like 55, 60% in favor when you look at most national polls. Obviously, if you poll Los Angeles or New York, you're going to find more pro-choice people. If you poll, Austin or Tulsa, Oklahoma or something like that, you're going to find more pro-life people. But when you look at a national poll, it's pretty close. Slightly pro-choice, but pretty dang close. So basically, the Supreme Court is saying now that in the legal system, abortion is not enshrined in the Constitution, which it is not. That's what they were determining. Was abortion specifically defined in the Constitution? And I mean, really, you can't argue that it was. I know they tried to argue it was, but it was not. You have to go forward and set laws on this. Now, this is where I have a unique approach, because you have to set a law to allow abortion in your state, right? Or technically you have to set a law to not allow abortion in your state, but you can also allow it, right? Here in Canada, that's what they did federally. It was like the vast majority of Canadians are pro-choice. It's something like 80-something% the last time I looked at a poll. So like way higher proportion here are pro-choice. And this is a few decades ago now, maybe 15 years ago or so. They just passed a law saying, okay, like legal abortion is allowed just permanently in Canada. It was passed through our House of Commons, passed through our Senate, and it received royal assent and became a law that abortion is allowed, safe abortion is allowed. In the U.S., at the federal level, it seems like that's not possible. But I actually have a solution, because it's quite clear to me that the country is split in half on two issues. There are two things that really get people going politically in the American system, and that is obviously abortion, and the other one is the freedom to carry a weapon, right? Their gun laws. It seems to me like at the federal level, you could have done something with this. You could have kept abortion legal and increased access to weapons, and both sides would have been content with that. Right? And that's the sort of thing that like politicians back in the day would have done, but today you cannot have that, because both sides want something that the other side doesn't want, but you have to you have to give up one thing to get something else, and that would have been a trade-off where they could have passed federal legislation. It seems likely anyways that they could have passed federal regulation. However, what they did instead was passed it off to the Supreme Court and said, you decide. The problem is that over time, the Supreme Court can overturn any of their previous decisions. This was not enshrined. It wasn't set in stone. It wasn't permanent. And they always knew that. And now you're seeing these people talking on television saying things like this was enshrined in our Constitution and this was already decided. But that's the problem, is it wasn't enshrined in the Constitution. And all that was decided was a specific case, right? One case was decided, and it just got that decision was used moving forward to justify future decisions. But as of now, they're allowed, and they reviewed it, and they said, you know what? No, this was actually wrong. And a lot of legal scholars actually think that Roe v. Wade was the wrong decision. Even pro-life jurors, not jurors, but lawyers. I forget the term. I'm trying to find a term in my head. I can't find it. But legal professionals and experts have said that pro-life and pro-choice have said that it is not correct, the decision in Roe v. Wade, and instead this should have been decided in federal parliament, or at the federal level, legally. And the House of Commons is what I was trying to say. Or in the House. The problem here, though, is that now it goes to the states, and you're having states ban abortion. And that's what we're seeing, right? We've seen, I think, 3 have already filed. There's like 6 or 7 who are drafting legislation. And I mean, it just goes on, right? And basically, in half the country, you're not going to be able to get an abortion, and in the other half, you will. A lot of people are upset by this state-by-state way that things are done. But honestly, this is a country we're dealing with that is split literally since the Civil War in 2 different parties, 2 different views of the world. And of course, some states have kind of changed over time, but it's pretty much been the same since the end of the Civil War. And that's not going to change. And so many people, this is the thing that really kind of confuses me, because so many people are upset about this who don't live in a state that it impacts them. Now, I understand, like an injustice somewhere is an injustice everywhere, and that sort of mentality. But doesn't it seem like the right thing to do if you are pro-life and you want to live somewhere with access to abortion? Because there are some people, like, to be honest, like people like myself who would be pro-choice, who, if I had an opportunity to like move to Dallas, I wouldn't be like, oh no, because abortion's not legal there, like I'm not going to go live there. It's not something in my realm, my politics, that's like a deal breaker. But for a lot of people it is, which is like, okay, it's fine, right? I'm very passionate about my beliefs on it, but at the same time, it's like, I'm not going to not live somewhere because of that one regulation. We're not talking about like, communism or Nazism or something like that, where I would draw the line. But a lot of people claim to feel that way, so then leave. Pro-life people have literally left states where abortion is still legal, and they are locating in other places. I mean, like, you can actually see like it's happening. There are well-documented cases. There's a lot of social media influencers who are like religious families and stuff that are relocating from California, New York, Pennsylvania, whatever, to more conservative states that are banning abortion, because that's the kind of society they want to live in. Fine, right? That's what you do. Now, the real concern that I have is the impact that this has on poorer populations. And this is why, to me, like, there really is no argument here, because, like, young pregnancies typically impact lower income families because they don't have access to preventative measures for of birth control and whatnot. And so you end up with this overwhelmingly unequal distribution of individuals who are of low income, who are impacted by young pregnancies, and ultimately seeking abortions. So because of that, in a place like Atlanta, which is, Georgia is a conservative state, probably going to ban abortion. Atlanta has an overwhelming number of people living below the poverty line that would be affected by this, that cannot drive or take a bus or something to get access to an abortion somewhere else. Another part of that, though, is some states are trying to make it illegal to leave the state to get an abortion. Now, this becomes really interesting, and I mentioned this on the last episode we talked about abortion on, because if abortion is equivalent to murder, which legally that's what they're trying to make it, right? Like, you can get life in prison if you're a doctor and in some states they're trying to make it life in prison for the woman as well, and making accomplice, like if you're the man and you know about it, like you're an accomplice essentially to this murder of a baby. That's what they're trying to do. Well, if that's the case, if you go from Georgia to New York to get an abortion and return to Georgia, and they can prove that you did that, murder, technically, you would still be charged with in your home state, right? So if it's equivalent to murder, when you return to Georgia, you should be charged with it. It's not a misdemeanor, which is like a state or local fine or whatever. There are misdemeanors that can give you jail time, right? Like state-wide offenses that can give you jail time. Like marijuana is a big thing for that, right? Where in some places it's a misdemeanor. Federally, it's a federal crime. It's super complicated, right? But it's like in some states you can go to jail, and others you will go to jail, and in some you can just do it freely. But this is going to be the first thing, though, where it's like, okay, if I leave Texas, go to California to get an abortion, and return to Texas, I can still, under their law, be charged with getting that abortion. As I'm sure that you can tell or assume, that causes a crazy amount of issues and problems in just the criminal proceedings, because you're not leaving the United States, right? So like there are places in the world where child sex slavery is like totally legal, right? But it's illegal as an American or a Canadian citizen to go to these people and access a child sex slave. When you return to your home country, we will charge you with whatever the charge is that you're guilty of, right? Just like murder. If you go and kill someone and then return to Canada and they find out about it, they can charge you with murder if they can prove it here, right? Well, at the state level, all of a sudden, it's like you're within the same federal jurisdiction, and you broke a state offense somewhere else, but they're going to charge you as if you broke it in your own state. That, I don't think, should uphold, right? Because they're saying the states can decide. Now, how the Supreme Court would deal with that, because that will make its way to the Supreme Court if those laws do pass. In specifically Texas is the one that's trying to pass that as well. I think Tennessee, I want to say it was. There's another state as well that's passing a very similar rule, that if you leave to get an abortion, or if a doctor leaves and gives an abortion in another state and they return, they will be guilty of that crime. Like, it's so, like, how do you manage that? What do you do? How can it be illegal to stay within the United States, cross a state border, and not commit an offense technically until you return? And that's the thing, is like the act of returning to Texas would effectively be when the crime is committed, because you're allowed to have an abortion in California. You're not allowed to leave Texas to have an abortion in California. But in Texas, it's not illegal until you return to Texas. So as a Texas resident, as a homeowner or a renter or something, how can it be legal for you, or rather, how can it be illegal for you to return home, no matter what you were doing in California, right? So like at the state level, you can leave Texas, get high in California, and return, and like they can't charge you with going to California and buying weed. You're not allowed to bring it back into Texas, but you can smoke it all in California and return. And what do they get? There's nothing they can do, and they know that, and so they didn't make those charges because you can't do that. But they are trying to make abortion equivalent to murder. And as I said, if it's equivalent to murder, then you can charge from outside your jurisdiction. And it's just, yeah, how do we deal with that? So, like I said, I really think there was a missed opportunity here where gun and abortion legislation are two things that are super important to both sides, And both sides could have come to an agreement on these two things. And I know the left doesn't want to give up any gun regulations, but guess what? The right doesn't want to give up any abortion regulations. And so you could have had those both federally actually made into laws. And if it's made into a law, then it is legal at that point in time. But as of right now, and forever into the past, since the 1600s when the country was founded, right? The United States, or the 1700s, I guess, the United States does not have legalized abortion in federally. It's a really weird country, and I don't mean that like I love visiting the States, but it's a weird country in its politics and in how it legislates for certain things that it is the U.S. is the model democracy that the rest of the world did build their democratic policies on after the Second World War. We all Canada had already kind of done so, but Europe and Australia, Japan, South Africa, to some extent, more recently especially, but some, and then there's a few other African nations, some South American nations that modeled what they do off of the United States. But there are these weird things that are done in the U.S. that all other modern democracies don't do. Right? And or do that the U.S. does not. And one of those things is nationally legalized abortion. It's widely accepted that not permitting access to abortions leads to a far higher death rate for the women seeking these procedures. As well, it's far more dangerous socially because you end up with the back alley abortion is there's just horrible stories that come of it, and you do end up with people taking drugs that they wouldn't have otherwise taken to deal with things like pain, not only physical pain but emotional pain and stuff like that. Most abortions today are a pill. It's over 70 or 80% of abortions are just a pill, and all of a sudden you're not allowing that at all, right? And so from a pharmaceutical perspective to, the unsafe options that people are going to opt for, all of a sudden you have a lot more of these intrusive operations, which are now going to be far less safe for the woman and highly illegal for any licensed doctors, which is why you end up getting a lot of people who aren't doctors performing these things. Because someone who went to school for 7 or 9 years isn't going to risk that license, right? It's going to be someone who didn't, who just, I don't know, learns how to do it somehow, or even just try, you know what I mean? It becomes so bad to be put into those situations. So it's really unfortunate that religion is still this powerful of a force in politics in the U.S. It's very odd to me because it's the only country where the non-religious people all moved to the same place and the religious people all move to the same places. You know what I mean? And here it's a blend. Even in urban areas, it's not uncommon to come across very religious people. In suburban and rural areas, it's the same thing, right? I know people who are born and raised on farms that their parents are 100% not religious, farmers their entire lives. You know what I mean? That's not a thing in the U.S. It's just not. It's so uncommon. Whereas here, it's kind of no, it's split. You get a lot of both, and everywhere, evenly distributed. There is no conservative or liberal, the conservatives in Canada are not overwhelmingly religious any more so than the liberals. There's obviously going to be a slight variance. It's not going to be 50-50, but it's not like the US where it's an overwhelming majority of Republicans are religious and an overwhelming majority of Democrats are non-religious. It's a very odd thing that has arisen in the last 20 years, and abortion is kind of the forefront of that argument, right? Where typically religious people are pro-life, non-religious are pro-choice. That's why when it comes to the debate, it's so important for people to remember who you're talking to, because like I said at the beginning, I had been involved in many of these debates. I've been at many like public debates on abortion and stuff like that, and I cringe a lot at the pro-choice arguments because they're not being approached in a way that I think is effective. Because it's just like when religious people bring up the Bible constantly, right? For me, I back out of any conversation, any debate, I should say, where the Bible is used as evidence. Because if you don't understand that I don't respect that book in any remote way like you do, to me it is a work of average medieval poetry. Really, right? It's like, yes, I've read it a few times, but it's a work of a blend of actual events and mostly fiction, and that's the way that I look at it. It's just like pointing to Harry Potter and being like, Dumbledore said, when in the darkness, one only needs to find the light. So, like, oh my God, like, think of all the, the light is so important. That's why we all need to have electricity. You know what I mean? Like, make some weird argument about how Harry Potter is meaningful in some capacity. That's the way that I look at that book and all other of those books. So, when you have to remember that when that is used against you, the Bible is used against you in an argument, you can't, in the abortion debate, approach it without realizing what they think, because they truly believe it is murder. So for you to be talking about how it's more important for a woman to have body autonomy than it is otherwise, right, to be forced to carry a baby to term, that is equivalent to saying, in their opinion, in a pro-life opinion, it's equivalent to saying that you believe that your body autonomy to punch someone in the face supersedes their body autonomy to get punched in the face. That's how they view it. They view it as a living, breathing, fully functioning baby in that woman, and it is murder. And when you realize that, and I mean when you really realize that, the debate becomes a lot more difficult, but you can be much more effective in how you have that conversation. And I'll say to people who are pro-life, it's the same on the other side. When you're debating with a pro-choice person, I do not, and I'll speak for myself here, I do not approach that debate remotely thinking that that is 100% going to be a living person, because it's statistically not, especially if we're talking about a first trimester abortion. And now I'm one of those people who, like, once you're out of the first trimester, like, I personally think that is too late. Okay? You have a short window where I think abortion is acceptable, beyond which it is not, right? And I draw that line. Some people choose not to, but I draw that line. For me, the first trimester is where I draw the line. So, but through the first trimester, it's like 20% of pregnancies, between 20 and 40%. It's like a super high number of pregnancies fail. And in the second to third trimester, it's still like 15 or 20% that fail. So it's like to carry a baby to term is statistically unlikely. It is statistically unlikely to carry a baby to term. So if we're approaching it from that, to me, an abortion is just like, we're bumping the number from, like, I guess it's not statistically unlikely, but it's not a great, it's like a, whatever, 55 to 60% odds of being 3 weeks pregnant to carrying a baby to term, right? It's like, it's not very good. I'm just saying, let's bump it up to 100%, do the abortion and get it over with, right? So it's two totally different ways of looking at the same problem. And you have to understand how the other side perceives the problem in order for you to have a conversation with them. And this took me years to figure out because I could not understand the pro-life argument. I really couldn't. And then finally one day I sat down and I was like, what are they saying? Like, I don't understand how you have this approach. And really what it comes down to is they truly believe this is murder, and pro-choice people truly believe that is not yet human life. There are people who go way overboard and they're like, oh, it's not a life at all. And it's not even human. That's not true. It's evidently going to become human life. You can't be ridiculous. You can't be stupid in these debates and hope to come out well, right? But you can be logical in your approach. And ultimately, from an ethical point of view, this is a toss-up. It is literally a toss-up. Because if you believe that it is murder, I should say, if you believe it is murder, then it's wrong. If you believe that a woman should be able to determine if she carries or not, then you believe it is right. And there's no other way, there's no other approach to this. It's one or the other, and it is right down the middle. Ethically, it's a complete toss-up. And that's why we are where we are. And so you're never going to see abortion federally regulated in the U.S., I don't think. And really, like, it sucks in my perspective. Other people are super happy about this decision. It's 50-50. And, unfortunately, I think we are going to see things like the back alley abortion come back in some places. Like, I would look at Atlanta is a place that jumps out to me with the most concern if Georgia does pass some conservative restrictions on abortion. But at the same time, this could be an opportunity for the Democrats to actually do well in the upcoming midterms, right? Because there's an election this fall, are the midterm elections. And so far, I've been looking it up today, but I haven't actually seen. So basically, this is all we have for polling so far, and this is through a CBS News survey in May. So this is before it was fully Roe v. Wade was overturned. But 40% of Democrats said they would be more likely to vote if Roe v. Wade were overturned. 17% of Republicans said that. 49% of Republicans said they felt likely to vote for a political candidate who did not want it overturned. So about half. Ultimately, though, the thing that matters is among independent voters, 45% would be more likely to support pro-choice candidates. 23% were pro-life of independents. That's a big number. 45% of independents are pro-choice. So to me, that means that the Democrats now have a leg up going into these fall elections. And we'll see, right? Time will tell, as I always say. But this could be a really bad thing for the Republicans, or it might be nothing at all because it's done state by state, and ultimately it won't negatively impact most Democrats, and it won't negatively impact most Republicans to their own opinions, right? Because they typically live in those states. Anyways, as I said, time will tell. We'll find out more in the upcoming elections, but this is decided now. Abortion is no longer legal in the U.S. I have seen like advertising for companies that are like trying to bring people to Canada and Mexico to get abortions. I'm not sure why, because it's like It's far cheaper unless maybe you live in North Dakota or something like that, where crossing the border to Canada is right there. But like abortions are legal in half of the states, so it's just people are just being ridiculous. But anyways, thank you for tuning into the podcast this week. Thanks for sticking around right to the end. I hope you took something away from today. It's heavy news, you know. I try to be upbeat about it, but I know this type of news does bother people in both aspects. It bothers people because abortions are obviously becoming illegal in some places, and it bothers some people because that bothers people. So whatever, you're never gonna win, right? But I try to be upbeat about it, and I hope that you can have a positive opinion of it as well. As always, if you enjoyed this episode, please tell your friends and family about it. Word of mouth, sharing on social media. Take a screenshot of the podcast playing and share it on your stories. Don't forget to tag me, of course. All of my social media accounts are in the description to this podcast, right around the subscribe button. And if you haven't done so, you can hit that subscribe button to automatically get notified when the podcast goes live. And some places it even downloads it automatically, which is pretty sweet. So thank you all so much. I will be back next Wednesday, of course. But until then, please keep on laughing and keep on learning.